I remember the weight of silence, not the kind that falls gently after laughter dies down, but the heavy, suffocating kind that presses against your chest until breathing feels like an act of defiance. That's what filled my parents' living room the night I told them about the baby. A silence so complete it seemed to erase me before they even spoke. I was 26 years old, sitting on the edge of the same cream-colored sofa where I'd opened Christmas presents as a child, where I'd cried over my first heartbreak, where my mother had once brushed my hair while we watched old movies together. The fabric felt different that night, colder, or perhaps I was the one who had changed. Pregnant, my father repeated the word as if tasting something rotten. He stood by the fireplace, one hand gripping the mantel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. And unmarried. Dad, Don't. He held up his other hand, palm facing me like a stop sign. Don't try to explain this away. Don't insult us with excuses. My mother sat in her usual chair, the one by the window where morning light always found her. But there was no light now, only darkness pressing against the glass, and her face looked carved from stone. She hadn't looked at me once since I'd said the words. Not once. "We raised you better than this," she said quietly, her voice carrying more weight than if she'd screamed. "We raised you to respect yourself, to respect God, to respect this family." "I do respect." "Then how could you do this?" She finally turned to face me, and I wished she hadn't. The disappointment in her eyes was worse than any anger could have been. "How could you shame us like this? Everyone will know. Everyone in our church, in our community, they'll all know that our daughter is—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. "I love him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're engaged. We're getting married." "When?" My father's question came out sharp as a blade. "Before or after the entire town knows our daughter opened her legs before opening a Bible." The cruelty of it stole my breath. This was my father, the man who used to call me his little songbird, who had taught me to ride a bike and told me I could be anything I wanted to be. Now he looked at me like I was something dirty he'd stepped in. "James," my mother said, her tone a warning. But she wasn't defending me. She was protecting the sanctity of her living room from coarse language. I stood up, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. At 5 months, I was just starting to show, a small curve I'd been hiding under loose sweaters. Now I let my hand rest there, protective, defiant. "We're getting married next month," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "I came here to tell you first, to invite you to be part of this. I thought you'd want to know about your grandchild." "Grandchild?" My mother laughed, but it was a sound without humor. "You think we're going to celebrate this? Stand by while you make a mockery of everything we taught you?" "I made a choice," I said. "Maybe not the one you wanted, but it's my life. This is my baby. And Lucas—" "Lucas," my father spat the name like a curse. "The man who couldn't even respect you enough to marry you before getting you pregnant? What kind of man is that?" "He's a good man. He loves me." "He wants this baby as much as I do." "Then where is he?" My mother's eyes glittered with something cruel. "Why isn't he here, facing us with you? Why are you here alone, defending him?" The truth was, I'd asked to come alone. Lucas had wanted to come with me, had insisted on it, but I'd thought my parents would take it better if I spoke to them first, mother to daughter, father to daughter. I'd been naive enough to believe that blood would matter more than pride. "He wanted to come," I said. "I asked him not to." "You thought we'd forgive you more easily if you came crying to us alone." My father moved away from the fireplace, his tall frame casting long shadows across the room. "You thought we'd take you back, help you clean up this mess, pretend everything is fine?" "I'm not asking you to pretend anything. I'm asking you to be my parents, to love me even when I'm not perfect." "Love has limits," my mother said, and those 3 words shattered something inside me. Love has conditions. One of those conditions is basic decency, basic morality. You've violated that. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall, not yet. So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on me? You turned your back on us first, my father said, when you decided your desires mattered more than your family's honor, when you decided to throw away everything we taught you. I didn't throw away anything. I fell in love. I'm having a baby. These aren't sins. They are when you do them in the wrong order. My mother stood now, smoothing her skirt with precise, controlled movements. We have a reputation in this community. Your father is a deacon. I lead the women's ministry. Do you understand what this does to us, to our standing? And there it was, not concern for me, not worry about my well-being or the baby's, just reputation, just what the neighbors would think, what the church ladies would whisper over their coffee and scripture. I am your daughter, I said, my voice breaking on the last word. Doesn't that matter more than what strangers think? You stopped being our daughter the moment you decided to live like this, my father said, and the finality in his voice made my legs weak. If you want to throw your life away, do it somewhere else. Don't drag us down with you. The room spun slightly. I reached out to steady myself against the arm of the sofa. You're disowning me? We're releasing you to face the consequences of your choices, my mother said, her voice perfectly even, perfectly controlled. We won't fund this lifestyle. We won't support this decision. If you choose to keep this baby, to marry this man, you do it without us. If I choose to keep, the implications hit me like ice water. You want me to get rid of the baby? Neither of them answered directly, but the silence spoke volumes. Get out, my father said quietly. Pack your things and leave. You're not welcome in this house anymore. I looked at my mother, searching her face for any sign of the woman who had kissed my scraped knees, who had helped me practice for school plays, who had cried at my college graduation. But she had already turned away, staring out the dark window as if I'd already ceased to exist. Mom, I whispered, one last desperate attempt. You heard your father. Leave. I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Each step was mechanical, automatic. The hallway walls were lined with family photos, graduations, holidays, vacations to the beach. In every single one, I was smiling. That girl felt like someone else entirely. My room looked exactly as I'd left it when I moved out 3 years ago. The same floral bedspread, the same bookshelf crammed with novels, the same desk where I'd done my homework. I grabbed the suitcase from my closet, the one I'd used for college, and started filling it with whatever I could reach. Clothes, shoes, toiletries. My hands shook so badly I could barely zip it closed. I took one last look around the room, at the walls that had held my secrets and dreams, and something inside me hardened. If they could turn their backs so easily, then I would learn to live without them. The walk down the stairs felt endless. My parents were exactly where I'd left them, my father by the fireplace, my mother by the window. Neither looked at me as I crossed the living room. Neither said goodbye. I stopped at the front door, my hand on the knob, and turned back. When you meet your grandchild, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, and you will meet them someday, I hope you can explain why their mother wasn't worth fighting for. I didn't wait for a response. I stepped out into the October night, pulling the door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything I'd ever known. The air was thick with the smell of rain about to fall. I loaded my suitcase into the trunk of my car, a 10-year-old sedan that had seen better days, and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. That's when I let the tears come, hot and silent, streaming down my face until I couldn't see the steering wheel anymore. I called Lucas. He answered on the first ring. How did it go? His voice was gentle, hopeful. I couldn't speak. I opened my mouth, but no words came out, just a sob that tore from somewhere deep in my chest. I'm coming to get you, he said immediately. Where are you? Still in their driveway. Don't move. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Lucas. Don't move, he repeated, and I could hear him already grabbing his keys, his footsteps quick and purposeful. "I'm coming." I sat there in the darkness, watching the windows of my childhood home. The lights were still on, warm and golden. My parents were in there, probably sitting exactly where I'd left them, probably already convincing themselves they'd made the right choice. Maybe they were relieved. Maybe my mother was already planning what to tell the church ladies, crafting a story that would preserve their reputation while erasing me from the narrative entirely. The first drops of rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the roof of my car like impatient fingers. I watched the water streak down the windshield, distorting the view of the house until it looked like something from a dream or a nightmare. Lucas arrived in 18 minutes. I saw his headlights cutting through the rain before I heard the engine. He pulled up behind my car and was out of his truck before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt. He yanked open my door and pulled me into his arms, not caring that the rain was soaking us both. "I've got you," he murmured into my hair. "I've got you." I clung to him, this man who had stayed when my own blood had turned away, and cried into his shoulder until I had nothing left. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just held me while the rain poured down and my old life washed away into the gutters. "Come on," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "Let's get you somewhere dry." He transferred my suitcase to his truck and insisted on driving me in his vehicle, leaving my car parked on the street. I didn't argue. I was so tired, bone-deep tired, in a way I'd never experienced before. Lucas lived in a modest apartment on the other side of town, a one-bedroom place with mismatched furniture and walls that needed painting. It had never looked so beautiful to me as it did that night, with its warm light and the smell of the coffee he always left brewing. He helped me inside, sat me on his worn couch, and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders even though I wasn't cold. Then he knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. "Tell me what they said." So I did. Every word, every look, every moment of that horrible conversation. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with each detail, his hands squeezing mine gently whenever my voice threatened to break. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm going to marry you tomorrow." I almost laughed. "Lucas, we don't have to." "Tomorrow," he repeated firmly. I was going to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect setting, but screw that. I'm not letting you feel for one more day like you're alone in this. We're getting married tomorrow at the courthouse, and then I'm taking you home to meet my parents. Your parents? I felt a flutter of panic. I can't meet them now, not like this. Yes, you can. His brown eyes were fierce, determined. My mother has been asking to meet you for months. I kept putting her off because I wanted to wait for the right time, but there's never going to be a perfect time. She's going to love you. They're both going to love you. What if they don't? What if they... I couldn't finish the sentence. The thought of facing more rejection was unbearable. They will, Lucas said with absolute certainty. But even if they didn't, even if the whole world turned its back on you, I wouldn't. Do you understand that? I am never leaving you. Not because of the baby, not because of some sense of obligation, but because I love you. I have loved you since the moment you spilled coffee all over my laptop in that cafe and then tried to dry it with napkins. That did make me laugh, watery and small, but real. I still can't believe you asked for my number after I destroyed your computer. I asked for your number because I saw how you cared, how you panicked and tried to fix it even though it was clearly beyond fixing. You have this enormous heart, and I fell in love with it instantly. He reached up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away the tears that wouldn't stop falling. Your parents are fools. They threw away something priceless because they care more about appearances than they do about their own daughter. That's on them. That's their loss. And someday they're going to realize it, and it's going to destroy them. I don't want to think about someday, I whispered. I can barely think about tomorrow. Then don't. Just think about right now. Right now, you're safe. Right now, you're loved. Right now, there's a baby growing inside you who is going to have parents who would burn down the world before turning their backs on them. That's what matters." He was right. I knew he was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your bones are two different things, and that night I felt nothing but loss. Lucas made me tea and insisted I eat something, even though I had no appetite. He gave me his bed and took the couch himself, despite my protests. As I lay there in his sheets that smelled like his cologne, woodsy and clean, I placed my hand on my stomach and felt the first flutter of movement. The baby, our baby, kicking for the first time. I started to call out to Lucas, to tell him, but then I stopped. This moment felt private, sacred. Just me and this tiny life that depended on me completely. A life that would never know my parents' conditional love, that would never sit in that cream-colored living room waiting for acceptance that would only come with impossible conditions. "I'll do better," I whispered into the darkness. "I'll love you better than I was loved. I'll never make you earn it, I promise." The baby kicked again, as if in answer. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of something burning. I stumbled out of the bedroom to find Lucas frantically waving a dish towel at a smoke-filled kitchen. "I was trying to make you breakfast," he said sheepishly, opening windows. "I think I cremated the eggs." Despite everything, I laughed, really laughed, and for a moment the weight on my chest lifted just enough to let me breathe. We went to the courthouse that afternoon. I wore a simple white dress I'd packed, not a wedding dress, just a dress that happened to be white. Lucas wore the only suit he owned, slightly wrinkled but earnest. There were no flowers, no family, no photographer to capture the moment, just a tired judge who had clearly performed this ceremony 1,000 times, a bored clerk as our witness, and two people promising to love each other forever. When Lucas slid the simple gold band onto my finger, a band he'd bought that morning from a jewelry store with whatever cash he had, I felt something shift inside me. Not healing, not yet, but the first tiny crack in the wall of grief I'd built around my heart. "I love you," he said when the judge pronounced us married, and he said it like a vow more binding than any ceremony. "I love you," I replied, and meant it with every fractured piece of myself. We drove to his parents' house that evening. I'd tried to convince Lucas to wait, to give me time to prepare, but he'd been insistent. "They need to meet you," he'd said. "They need to see what's happening. Trust me." I didn't understand what he meant until we pulled up to the gates. Gates. Actual gates, black wrought iron, stretching 12 feet high, with a security booth and a guard who smiled and waved us through. Beyond the gates, a long driveway wound through perfectly manicured grounds that looked like something from a magazine spread. "Lucas," I said slowly, staring at the mansion that was coming into view, "what exactly do your parents do?" He'd been quiet about his family, never mentioning much beyond that they lived upstate and he didn't see them as often as he should. I'd assumed he came from a normal, middle-class background like mine. The evidence in front of me suggested otherwise. "My father runs an investment firm," Lucas said carefully, watching my reaction, "and my mother is on the board of several major companies." "Investment firm?" I repeated faintly. "Several major companies." The house, mansion really, was 3 stories of white stone and endless windows that glowed with warm light in the gathering dusk. There were actual columns flanking the front entrance. A fountain burbled peacefully in the circular driveway. This wasn't wealth, this was dynasty. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, feeling a new panic rising in my throat. "Lucas, I can't, I'm not." "You're my wife," he said firmly, parking the truck next to a Mercedes that probably cost more than my parents' house. "That's all that matters to them. That's all that should matter." But it did matter. It mattered that I was showing up pregnant and disheveled, that I'd been disowned by my own family, that I had nothing to offer these people except the love I had for their son and the baby I carried. It mattered that I was wearing a wrinkled white dress and shoes I'd owned for 3 years, about to walk into a house that probably had more bathrooms than my childhood home had rooms. Lucas came around to open my door, reading the fear on my face. "Hey," he said softly, "my mother is the kindest person you'll ever meet. She's going to take one look at you and fall in love. I promise." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because I had nowhere else to go, no backup plan, no safety net beyond this man and his promises. The front door opened before we could knock, and a woman stepped out who took my breath away. She was in her early 50s, I guessed, with the kind of beauty that transcends age. Dark hair pulled back in an elegant twist, perfect posture, wearing what I recognized even with my limited fashion knowledge as a designer dress. But it was her eyes that struck me, warm brown eyes like Lucas's, eyes that found me immediately and softened with something I couldn't name. "Mom," Lucas said, and suddenly he was a boy again, eager and nervous. "Come inside," she said, and her voice carried an authority that wasn't harsh, just absolute. "Both of you, now." We followed her through a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than I'd made in my entire life. She led us to a sitting room, not a living room, a sitting room, with furniture that looked antique and priceless. "Sit," she instructed me, pointing to a velvet sofa. "You look exhausted." I sat because my legs were shaking too badly to do anything else. Lucas sat beside me, taking my hand. His mother remained standing, studying us both with those sharp, intelligent eyes. "Start from the beginning," she said, "and don't leave anything out." I looked at Lucas, panicked, but he just squeezed my hand. "Tell her," he said, "tell her everything." So for the second time in 24 hours, I recounted the nightmare of my parents' rejection. But this time, as I spoke, Lucas's mother's expression transformed. Her initial composure cracked, revealing first shock, then anger, then something that looked almost like pain. When I finished, explaining how we'd gotten married that afternoon, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved with startling speed, crossing the room and kneeling in front of me. She took my free hand in both of hers, and I realized she was wearing a wedding ring that could have put my eye out with its diamonds. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, and there were tears in her eyes. "You are family now. Do you understand? You are my daughter, and that baby you're carrying is my grandchild, and what happened to you is unforgivable. Your parents." She stopped herself, taking a deep breath. "I won't speak ill of them because they're your parents, and someday you may want them in your life again. But right now, what matters is this. You have a home. You have family. You have everything you need." I started crying again, exhausted tears that I couldn't control. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to pull my hand away to wipe my face. I'm sorry, I don't mean to." "Don't apologize for tears," she said firmly. "Cry all you need. This house has seen plenty of tears. It can handle more." She looked up at Lucas. "Why didn't you call me sooner? Why didn't you tell me what was happening?" "It just happened yesterday, Mom. I wanted to get her somewhere safe first, make sure she was okay. She's 5 months pregnant and her family threw her out." His mother's voice was sharp now, the executive cutting through. "You should have called me immediately. I could have—" She stopped, shook her head. "Never mind, you're here now. That's what matters." She stood and called out, "Richard!" A man appeared in the doorway, tall, distinguished, with gray at his temples and the same authoritative presence as his wife, Lucas's father. "Richard, this is our daughter-in-law," she announced. "They were married this afternoon. She's 5 months pregnant, and her family has disowned her." She said it all matter-of-factly, like she was reading items off a grocery list, but I could hear the steel underneath. Richard's eyebrows rose, but only slightly. He crossed the room and extended his hand to me. "Welcome to the family," he said simply. "I'm sorry to hear about your parents. Their loss is our gain." It was such a strange thing to say, so formal yet kind, that I almost laughed. Almost. "Malcolm!" Lucas's mother called again, and a man in his 30s appeared. A butler, I realized with surreal shock. They had a butler. Please prepare the blue guest room. Our daughter will be staying with us. Mom, we were planning to go back to my apartment. Absolutely not. She turned to Lucas with a look that probably sent CEOs scrambling. Your apartment is a one-bedroom. Where exactly was she going to sleep while pregnant? On your couch? She didn't wait for an answer. No, you'll both stay here until we can find you proper accommodations. End of discussion. Mrs. Harrison, I started, but she held up a hand. Catherine, call me Catherine, or Mom if you're comfortable with that. Her expression softened. We don't stand on ceremony in this family. Well, not at home anyway. A laugh escaped me, slightly hysterical. This is your home? For better or worse, she smiled. I know it's overwhelming, but you'll get used to it. Come, let me show you to your room. You need rest. I looked at Lucas, who nodded encouragingly. Catherine offered me her arm like I was fragile china, and I took it because my legs still didn't feel entirely steady. She led me up a curved staircase with a banister so polished I could see my reflection in it, down a hallway lined with artwork that probably belonged in museums, to a bedroom that was bigger than Lucas's entire apartment. The blue room, she said, opening the door. It was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. A four-poster bed with silk curtains, windows overlooking the gardens that were lit with soft landscape lighting, furniture that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. There was an ensuite bathroom visible through an open door, all marble and gold fixtures. I can't, I whispered. This is too much. It's exactly enough, Catherine said firmly. Your family. This is what family does. She guided me to sit on the edge of the bed. Lucas told me what happened, in the car, I assume, before you arrived. He called ahead. She sat beside me, not close enough to be invasive, but near enough that I could feel her warmth. What your parents did was cruel. It was wrong, and I want you to know that it says everything about them and nothing about you. But I'm pregnant, and we weren't married. You fell in love. You're having a baby. These are beautiful things, not shameful ones. Her voice was so certain, so clear. The order in which they happened is irrelevant. What matters is that you're here now, and you're safe, and you're going to have every resource you need to bring this baby into the world surrounded by love. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But the wound from my parents was too fresh, too raw. I don't understand, I said, my voice breaking. You don't even know me. Why are you being so kind? Catherine's eyes grew distant for a moment, like she was looking at something far away. Because, she said slowly, I know what it's like to need kindness and not receive it. I know what it's like to be judged by people who should have loved you unconditionally. She focused back on me. And I promised myself that if I ever had the power to change that for someone else, I would. Consider it changed. She stood and moved to a dresser, opening drawers that revealed neatly folded clothes. These should fit you, more or less. We'll go shopping tomorrow for maternity clothes and anything else you need. But for tonight, make yourself comfortable. There's a bathroom through that door. Take a bath if you'd like. The tub is quite wonderful. I'll have Malcolm bring up some tea and something light to eat. Catherine? She turned back, waiting. Thank you, I whispered. I don't know what to. You don't have to know anything right now, she said gently. Just rest. Let yourself be taken care of. Everything else can wait. She left, closing the door softly behind her, and I was alone in this beautiful blue room that felt like something from a dream. I wanted to pinch myself, to wake up and find myself back in Lucas's apartment, to discover this was some elaborate fantasy my stressed mind had conjured. But when I touched the silk duvet, it was real and cool beneath my fingers. When I walked to the window and looked out at the illuminated gardens, the view didn't waver or dissolve. This was real. This impossible, overwhelming kindness was real. I did take a bath. The tub was enormous, deep enough to submerge myself completely. and there were expensive soaps and oils lined up on a silver tray. I sank into water that was exactly the right temperature and let the warmth seep into muscles I hadn't realized were so tense. For the first time in 2 days, I let myself think about the baby. Really think about it, about them, about who they would become, what kind of life they would have. I'd been so consumed with my parents' rejection, with survival and fear, that I hadn't let myself imagine the future. But now, in this impossible house, with these impossible people who had welcomed me without hesitation, I let myself hope. Maybe this baby wouldn't grow up with my parents' conditional love. Maybe they would grow up here, in these gardens, with grandparents who chose kindness over reputation. Maybe everything that had felt like an ending was actually a beginning. The baby kicked, stronger now, and I pressed my hand to the spot. "We're going to be okay," I whispered. "I promise. We're going to be more than okay." When I emerged from the bathroom in a borrowed nightgown that was silk and probably cost more than my wedding dress, I found a tray on the bedside table with tea and delicate sandwiches and fresh fruit. There was also a note in elegant handwriting. "Sleep well, daughter. Tomorrow is a new day. See." I ate because the baby needed food, drank the tea because it was soothing, and climbed into a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. I thought I was too wound up to sleep, too overwhelmed by the day's impossible turns, but exhaustion pulled me under within minutes. I dreamed of my mother's face as she turned away from me, but in the dream, when I reached out, Catherine took my hand instead. The next few weeks passed in a blur of surreal adjustments. True to her word, Catherine took me shopping the very next day. Not to a mall or a department store, but to private boutiques where the staff knew her by name and brought us champagne while we browsed. I tried on maternity clothes that cost more than my car, and every time I protested the price, Catherine would simply hand her credit card to the associate and say, "We'll take it." "You're going to spoil me," I said after the third boutique, surrounded by shopping bags that Malcolm loaded into the car with practiced efficiency. "That's the idea," Catherine replied, utterly unrepentant. She also insisted I see her personal obstetrician, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, who worked out of a medical center that looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. The appointments were thorough and gentle, and for the first time, I felt like the pregnancy was something to be celebrated rather than hidden. "Your baby is healthy," Dr. Chen said, showing me the ultrasound screen where I could see tiny fingers and toes, a heartbeat that flickered like a star. "Measuring right on track. Would you like to know the sex?" I looked at Lucas, who had been beside me for every appointment, holding my hand and staring at the screen like it held the secrets of the universe. "Yes," we said together. Dr. Chen smiled. "Congratulations, you're having a girl." "A girl?" "A daughter." I started crying right there on the examination table, and Lucas kissed my forehead and whispered, "A little girl. We're having a little girl." Lucas cried too when we told her, which surprised me. This elegant, composed woman who ran boardrooms and managed millions wept openly and hugged me tight that I could feel her heartbeat against mine. "A granddaughter," she breathed. "Oh, my darling girl, do you know what this means?" I didn't, actually, but her joy was infectious, and for a moment I forgot about everything I'd lost and focused on everything I'd gained. Richard, Lucas's father, was quieter in his affection, but no less genuine. He started calling me daughter immediately, never with any hesitation or qualification. When I mentioned I was worried about finding work, I'd been a paralegal at a small firm before the pregnancy, but they'd let me go when I started showing. He made a phone call, and 3 days later, I had an interview at one of the top law firms in the city. "Dad, you can't just—" Lucas started to protest, but Richard held up a hand. "I can, and I did. She's qualified, she needs work, and they need good people. The rest is up to her." The rest is up to her. I got the job, not because of Richard's phone call, I was told, but because my interview went well and my references were solid. I chose to believe it, needed to believe it, because I didn't want to be a charity case even to these people who had shown me nothing but kindness. The work was good, challenging in ways that kept my mind occupied. The firm was accommodating about my pregnancy, letting me take afternoons off for doctor's appointments and not batting an eye when I needed to leave early because my feet were swelling. Lucas and I moved into a house Catherine found for us, a beautiful Victorian in a nice neighborhood, not too far from his parents, but with enough distance to feel independent. She paid the first year's rent and wouldn't hear any arguments about it. Consider it a wedding present, she said, one we would have given you anyway if we'd been at the wedding. There was no bitterness in her voice, no passive-aggressive guilt about not being invited. She understood we'd been desperate and hurt, and she held no grudge for it. This, I was learning, was who Catherine was, someone who understood that people made decisions in crisis and didn't judge them for it later. The house became our haven. Lucas painted the nursery a soft lavender, and I spent hours assembling baby furniture and washing tiny clothes and imagining our daughter in this space. We had baby showers, one thrown by Catherine's friends, elegant affairs with catered food and expensive gifts, and one thrown by Lucas's childhood friends, chaotic and loud and full of laughter. My parents were not invited to any of them. They had not reached out since that night. Not a phone call, not a text, nothing. It was like I'd died to them, and in a way, maybe I had. The daughter they'd raised, the one who followed rules and sought approval, was gone. The woman I was becoming had no patience for conditional love. But sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep because the baby was doing gymnastics against my ribs, I would think about them. I would remember my mother teaching me to bake, my father's terrible jokes, family vacations to the lake. The memories hurt like pressing on a bruise, but I couldn't seem to stop touching them. "Do you miss them?" Lucas asked one night, finding me on the porch swing with tears streaming down my face. "Yes," I admitted. "Is that stupid? They threw me away, and I still miss them." "It's not stupid. They're your parents. Of course you miss them." He sat beside me, pulling me against his shoulder. "But you don't need them. You have us. You have my parents. You have me. You have our daughter. We're your family now." "I know," I whispered. "I know that." But sometimes knowing something and feeling it are different things. He kissed the top of my head, and we sat there in silence, the October night crisp and cool around us, the future growing inside me with every breath. I was 7 months pregnant when the article came out. I didn't even know there was going to be an article. I'd been focused on work and preparing for the baby, on learning to navigate my new life with its strange mix of luxury and love. I'd stopped thinking about my old life, my old family, except in those quiet moments when grief ambushed me. Then Lucas came home one evening with his phone in his hand and an expression I couldn't quite read. "You need to see this," he said carefully. It was a business magazine article, one of those glossy profiles about successful families and their empires. The headline read, "The Harrison Legacy: How One Family Built an Empire on Innovation and Integrity." The article was mostly about Richard and Catherine, about the companies they'd built and the philanthropy they championed. But there, in the third paragraph, was a mention of Lucas and his new wife, described as a brilliant young paralegal who was expecting their first child. "It's nice," I said, confused about why Lucas looked so worried. "I didn't know they were doing this article, but it's—" "Keep reading." I did, and there, near the end, was a quote from Catherine that made my blood run cold. "Family is everything to us. We believe in welcoming people with open arms, in offering second chances, in understanding that love doesn't demand perfection." When our son brought his wife into our lives, we didn't see her circumstances. We saw her heart. That's what matters. It was kind, it was generous, it was also unmistakably about me and the fact that I'd been pregnant when Lucas and I married. Catherine hadn't said anything explicit, but the implication was clear to anyone paying attention. "Oh God," I whispered. "It gets worse," Lucas said quietly. "Check social media." The article had gone viral, not because of the business content, but because of that one quote.
People were dissecting it, praising Catherine for her progressive values, using it as a jumping-off point for discussions about family and acceptance and judgment. And somewhere in the comments, someone had figured out who I was. My full name, my hometown, my parents' names, everything. The internet, I discovered, was both cruel and kind in equal measure. Some people praised my courage as if getting pregnant had been a brave political statement rather than an accident born of love. Others called me a gold digger, said I'd trapped Lucas, said I was exactly the kind of woman who gave feminists a bad name. But the worst were the ones who found my parents' church website, who connected the dots, who started speculating about why a deacon's daughter had ended up pregnant and married to a billionaire's son. My phone rang 3 days later. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Is this her? A woman's voice, tight with emotion. Is this the woman who's been making up lies about the Thompson family? It took me a moment to place the name. Thompson, my mother's maiden name. This was my aunt, my mother's sister. Aunt Caroline? Don't you Aunt Caroline me. What you've done is despicable, making your parents out to be villains, airing family business to the press for attention. I didn't talk to any press, I said, my voice shaking. I didn't. You married into that family and let them trash your parents' reputation. Same difference. Her voice was harsh, unforgiving. Your mother is devastated. Your father can barely show his face at church. And for what? So you could play Cinderella? They're the ones who threw me out, I said, finding my voice. They're the ones who disowned me for being pregnant. I didn't make them do that. They had standards. They raised you with values, and you spat in their face. And now you're playing the victim for a magazine article? I'm not playing anything. I'm just trying to live my life. With his money, in his house, wearing his mother's charity like a crown. She laughed, bitter and sharp. You think you're special now? You think you're better than us? You're still the same girl who couldn't keep her legs closed. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Lucas found me sitting on the bathroom floor 20 minutes later, crying into my knees while the shower ran to mask the sound. He turned off the water, sat down beside me on the cold tile, and pulled me into his arms. They called, I said into his chest. My aunt. She said horrible things. I know. My mother got calls too. Someone leaked her private number. His voice was tight with anger. She's handling it, getting the number changed, talking to her lawyers about the harassment. But this is my fault. I should have warned you this might happen. When you marry into a family like mine, everything becomes public. It's not your fault. I pulled back to look at him. You didn't write the article. Your mother didn't say anything wrong. She was defending me. She was defending you against people who should have loved you unconditionally in the first place, Lucas said. But she didn't think about how it would blow up, how the internet would react. None of us did. I wiped my eyes with the heels of my hands. What do we do now? Nothing. We ignore it. It'll die down in a week when something else captures everyone's attention. That's how these things work. He was wrong. It didn't die down. It got worse. My parents issued a statement through their church. I read it on their website, shared by a former high school classmate who sent it to me with a message that just said, "I'm sorry." The statement was clinical, carefully worded, probably written by a lawyer. It said they were disappointed by the public speculation about their private family matters. It said they had always tried to instill strong moral values in their daughter. It said they were saddened by the choices she has made, but wished her well. It said they would appreciate privacy during this difficult time. It didn't say they loved me. It didn't say they missed me. It didn't say they'd made a mistake. It just said I was a disappointment, wrapped in language polite enough to share with the congregation. Catherine read the statement and immediately called her publicist. "We're issuing a response," she said into the phone, pacing the length of her living room while I sat on the couch feeling numb. "No, I don't care about optics. This is about my daughter, and I won't let them. Yes, my daughter. That's exactly what I'll call her.
Draft something and send it to me within the hour. Catherine, I say weakly, you don't have to. She covered the phone's mouthpiece. Yes, I do. They want to play this game. They want to use their church as a shield while they throw stones. Fine. But they're going to learn that you have a family who will fight for you. The response went out that evening on Catherine's personal social media accounts, which collectively had over 2 million followers. I've read the statement from the Thompson family with sadness and some anger. Let me be clear, my daughter-in-law is not a disappointment. She is brave, kind, brilliant, and strong. She is going to be an extraordinary mother. She made the mistake of believing her family would love her unconditionally. That's not a moral failing. That's faith in humanity. The only disappointment here is that some parents value reputation over their own children. We do not. She is ours now, and we will love her fiercely, publicly, and without condition. The internet exploded again. Some people praised Catherine for her stance. Others called her an enabler, said she was destroying traditional family values, said she was using her money and influence to steal someone else's daughter. The comments were vicious on both sides, and I stopped reading them after the first 100. But something else happened too. My phone started ringing. Friends from college I hadn't heard from in years, former coworkers, distant cousins I barely remembered. Some called to offer support. Others called to probe for details, to see if they could get their own piece of the viral drama. I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Then, 2 weeks after the article came out, someone knocked on our door at 10 o'clock at night. Lucas answered it while I stayed in the living room, one hand on my swollen belly, the other clutching a throw pillow like it could protect me from whatever fresh hell was about to arrive. I heard voices, Lucas's firm and low, another voice I knew but couldn't immediately place. Then Lucas said, "Absolutely not. You need to leave now." "Please," the other voice said, and I recognized it with a jolt. "I just need 5 minutes to talk to her." My father. I stood up, moving awkwardly with the weight of late pregnancy, and walked to the foyer. Lucas was blocking the doorway, his body tense, but I could see past him to where my father stood on the porch. He looked older than I remembered, thinner. There were new lines around his eyes, and his hair had gone grayer. He was wearing his church clothes, slacks and a button-down shirt, and clutching a Bible like a talisman. "Dad," I said, and Lucas immediately turned to me. "You don't have to do this," he said. "You don't owe him anything." I know. I did know. But seeing my father's face after all these months, seeing the man who had raised me standing on my doorstep like a stranger, I needed to hear what he had to say. "It's okay. Let him in." Lucas looked like he wanted to argue, but he stepped aside. My father entered slowly, looking around at our house, the hardwood floors Lucas had refinished himself, the furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the walls of us and Catherine and Richard. "Nice place," he said quietly. "Thank you. What do you want?" He flinched at the coldness in my voice, and part of me felt savage satisfaction at his discomfort. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what I'd felt that night in their living room. "I wanted to talk to you about everything that's been happening." "You mean the article?" "That, yes. And other things." He glanced at Lucas, who had positioned himself beside me, close enough to intervene if needed. "Could we speak privately?" "No," I said. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of my husband." The word husband landed like I'd thrown it. My father's jaw tightened. "Fine." He took a breath, and I could see him gathering himself, slipping into his preacher voice. "I came here to tell you that your mother and I have been praying. About you, about the situation, about everything." "The situation," I repeated flatly. "You mean your granddaughter?" Another flinch. "About the baby, yes. And we think, your mother thinks, that perhaps we were too hasty, that perhaps, now that you're married, now that you seem to have found stability, we could discuss reconciliation." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and wrong. "Reconciliation?" I said slowly. You want to reconcile now, after the article, after the whole world is talking about how terrible you were to me? That's not fair. We've been dealing with what? Embarrassment? Shame? People judging you? I laughed, and it came out harsh. Welcome to my life for the past 6 months. We were trying to protect you, he said, and there was pleading in his voice now. We thought if we made a clean break, if we showed you there were consequences, you'd see reason. You'd give up the baby, marry properly, start fresh. Give up the baby? The words came out as a whisper, barely audible. You wanted me to give up my daughter? We wanted what was best for you. No, you wanted what was best for you, for your reputation, for your standing in the church. I could feel tears burning, but I refused to let them fall. You threw me away like trash because I embarrassed you. And now that I'm married to a billionaire's son, now that I'm in magazines and have money and connections, suddenly you want to reconcile? It's not about the money. Then why now? I demanded. Why not a month ago? 2 months ago? Why not the day after you kicked me out, when I was sleeping in my car and crying myself to sleep every night? Why now, Dad? Tell me why now? He couldn't answer. He just stood there, Bible in hand, looking lost. I'll tell you why, I said, my voice shaking with rage I'd been holding back for months. Because you're embarrassed. Because that article made you look like monsters, and your church friends are asking questions, and suddenly your precious reputation is at stake. This isn't about love. This isn't about missing me or wanting to know your granddaughter. This is about damage control. That's not true, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Get out, Lucas said quietly, deadly. You heard her. Get out of our house. This is between me and my daughter. She's not your daughter, Lucas stepped forward, putting himself slightly in front of me. You gave up that right when you threw her out. She's my wife. She's my mother's daughter, and you are not welcome here. My father looked at me, his eyes searching for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or the girl I used to be, the one who would have folded under his authority. But I wasn't that girl anymore. That girl had died on their porch in the October rain. I'm sorry you came all this way, I said, and I was. Not sorry enough to take back what I'd said, but sorry that it had come to this. But I can't do this. I can't let you back in just because it's convenient for you now. I can't let my daughter grow up thinking that love is something you can turn on and off based on circumstances. Please, he said, and the desperation in his voice almost broke me. Almost. Your mother, she's not well. This whole thing has been hard on her. She misses you. She wants to. She had 6 months to miss me, I interrupted. 6 months to pick up the phone. She didn't. Neither did you. So no, I don't want to hear about how hard this has been for her, because it's been hard for me too. But I had people who showed up, people who didn't abandon me when I needed them most. And those people are my family now. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying different approaches in his mind, searching for the words that would crack my resolve. But there were no magic words, no speech that could undo the damage he'd done. I'll pray for you, he finally said, which was the closest thing to an admission of defeat he could manage. You do that, I replied, but do it from somewhere else. Lucas showed him out, closing the door with a decisive click. Then he came back to me and wrapped his arms around me, or as much around me as he could get with my pregnant belly in the way, and held me while I finally let myself cry. You did the right thing, he murmured. You know that, right? You did the right thing. Then why does it hurt so much? Because you loved them, because you wanted them to be better than they were. That's not your fault, that's theirs. The baby kicked hard, as if reminding me that I had more important things to focus on than the parents who'd failed me. I placed my hand over the spot and felt Lucas's hand cover mine. She's going to grow up knowing she's loved, I said. No conditions, no requirements, just loved. Absolutely, Lucas agreed. She's going to be so loved, she'll probably get sick of it. I laughed through my tears, and it felt like breathing after being underwater too long. My father's visit turned out to be just the first wave. Over the next few weeks, other family members tried to reach out. An uncle I barely knew sent a Facebook message. My mother's best friend called, saying she was mediating and wanted to help us all heal. Even my former youth pastor sent an email about forgiveness and family. I ignored them all. Catherine, meanwhile, became a fierce guardian. She hired a security company to monitor our house after someone leaked our address online. She got restraining orders against the few reporters who showed up trying to get interviews. She made it clear to everyone in her considerable network that I was not to be harassed or approached. "You don't have to do all this," I told her one afternoon while we were shopping for last-minute baby items. I was 36 weeks pregnant, moving like a beached whale, and increasingly anxious about everything. "Yes, I do," she said, examining a set of receiving blankets with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. "You're my daughter. This is what mothers do. We protect our children." Something your mother should have learned. It was the closest she'd come to directly criticizing my parents, and even then, she softened it by immediately changing the subject to whether we needed more burp cloths. I'd started calling her mom a few weeks earlier. It had slipped out accidentally when she'd brought me soup while I was homesick with a cold, and she'd frozen, her eyes going bright with tears. "Say that again," she'd whispered. "Mom?" She'd set down the soup and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. And when she pulled back, she said, "I never thought. I always wanted a daughter," and she'd stopped, overcome, and just held my hand for a long moment before collecting herself. Now, watching her fuss over baby blankets with the dedication of someone who truly cared, I felt a fierce surge of gratitude. I'd lost one mother, but I'd gained another. And this one had chosen me, not because of biology or obligation, but because she wanted to. "Thank you," I said quietly. She looked up, understanding immediately what I was thanking her for. "Always," she said simply. "I will always be here for you. Both of you." She nodded at my belly. "All three of you, I suppose, including that stubborn son of mine." Lucas had indeed been stubborn about everything, about making sure I didn't overwork, about coming to every doctor's appointment, about reading every parenting book he could get his hands on. He'd turned our garage into a woodworking shop and was building a rocking chair for the nursery, determined to create something with his own hands for his daughter. "He's nesting," Richard had observed one evening, watching his son through the window as Lucas sanded the chair arms with meticulous care. I did the same thing when Catherine was pregnant, built an entire nursery set, even though we could have bought anything we wanted. There's something about making it yourself. "It's sweet," I'd said, and Richard had smiled. He's going to be a good father, better than I was in some ways. I was too focused on work when he was young, missed too many school plays, too many bedtimes. He won't make that mistake. "You're a good father," I'd told him. Look how he turned out. Richard had looked at me with something like wonder. "You know, when he first told me about you, I was worried. Not because of the pregnancy or the circumstances, but because I thought, how can someone so young have faced what you faced and come out kind? But you did. You're remarkable." I'd cried, because I cried at everything now. Commercials, dropped spoons, the way sunlight looked coming through the windows. Pregnancy hormones had turned me into a walking tear factory, but these were good tears, grateful tears. Tears for the family I'd found in the ruins of the one I'd lost. My daughter was born on a Thursday in late November, 3 days before Thanksgiving. My water broke at 2 a.m, and Lucas drove us to the hospital while trying not to panic and failing spectacularly. "Breathe," I told him as he ran a red light. "I'm breathing. Are you breathing? You need to breathe." "I am breathing. Watch the road." Catherine and Richard met us at the hospital despite the ungodly hour, both fully dressed and alert as if they'd been waiting for this moment. Maybe they had been. The labor was long, 16 hours of pain that made me understand why they called it labor. But Catherine was there the whole time, holding one hand while Lucas held the other, coaching me through contractions and telling me I was strong, I was brave, I was doing perfectly. When my daughter finally emerged, screaming her outrage at the world, the nurse placed her on my chest, and everything else fell away. All the pain, all the fear, all the grief, it dissolved in the face of this tiny, perfect person who had my nose and Lucas's eyes and lungs that could wake the dead. "Hello," I whispered to her, touching her impossibly small fingers, her downy head. "Hello, little one. I'm your mama. I've been waiting for you." Lucas was crying. Catherine was crying. Richard's eyes were suspiciously bright. Even the nurse looked misty as she helped clean the baby while keeping her on my chest. "She's perfect," Lucas breathed. "God, she's perfect." "She's ours," I said, and the word felt like magic. Ours. Not theirs, not anyone else's. Ours to love and protect and raise. We named her Grace Catherine Harrison. Grace for the grace we'd been shown, Catherine for the woman who'd shown it. When the nurse took her to be weighed and measured, Catherine approached the bed. "May I?" she asked, and when I nodded, she kissed my forehead. "You did beautifully. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you for being here, Mom." Her face crumpled. "Where else would I be? This is where I belong." They brought Grace back wrapped in a pink blanket, and Lucas held her with the terrified reverence of someone holding the most precious thing in the world, which, I suppose, he was. "Hi, Gracie," he whispered. "I'm your dad. I'm going to be so good to you. I'm going to protect you and love you and embarrass you terribly when you're a teenager. It's going to be great." I laughed, exhausted and euphoric, and reached for his hand. Our daughter was here. Our family was complete. Later, after everyone had left to let me rest, after Grace had nursed for the first time with determined intensity, I lay in the hospital bed with her sleeping on my chest and thought about my parents. They didn't know. They didn't know they had a granddaughter, didn't know her name, didn't know what she looked like. They'd chosen that. They'd chosen their pride over this moment, this miracle, and I realized with crystal clarity that I didn't need them anymore. I'd thought I might, thought there would always be a hole shaped like them in my life. But looking at Grace's tiny sleeping face, I understood that the hole had filled itself with something better, with chosen family, with people who showed up, with love that didn't come with conditions. "Your grandparents are going to spoil you rotten," I whispered to her. "Grandma Catherine already has your closet full of clothes, and Grandpa Richard is building you a trust fund that'll probably pay for several colleges. Your dad is building you a rocking chair, and I'm going to sing you to sleep every night. We're going to be so happy, little love. So happy." She made a small sound in her sleep, her hand curling against my chest, and I felt something in me settle. This was my family. This was my life. And it was beautiful. We brought Grace home 2 days later to a house filled with flowers and balloons and more stuffed animals than one baby could possibly need. Catherine had organized everything, including a night nurse for the first 2 weeks, because you need to rest and recover, and there's no medal for exhausting yourself. I was too tired to argue. The night nurse, a kind Jamaican woman named Marva, was a godsend. She taught me how to breastfeed properly, how to swaddle, how to interpret Grace's different cries. She also made sure I slept and ate and showered, which felt impossibly luxurious. Lucas was a natural, surprising both of us. He changed diapers without hesitation, walked Grace around the house at 3 a.m, singing off-key lullabies, stared at her for hours like she might disappear if he looked away. "I can't believe she's real," he said one night, holding her against his chest while she slept. "I can't believe we made something this perfect." "We did good," I agreed, watching them from the rocking chair. The one he'd built, which turned out beautiful despite his protests that he wasn't a real carpenter. We did better than good. We did miraculous. Catherine visited every day, often bringing meals or just sitting with Grace while I napped. She never overstayed, never pushed, just offered help and left when I needed space. Richard came too, less frequently, but with the same quiet devotion, holding his granddaughter with the careful reverence of someone who'd waited a long time for this. She has your determination, he told me one afternoon, watching Grace refuse to sleep despite obvious exhaustion. And Lucas's stubbornness. This is going to be interesting. Terrifying, more like, I said, but I was smiling. The first month blurred into a haze of feedings and diaper changes and moments of such pure joy I thought my heart might burst. Grace was a good baby. She slept for reasonable stretches, only cried when she needed something, and had started smiling at around 4 weeks, which Lucas insisted was because she recognized how awesome he was. She's smiling because she has gas, I told him. That's a real smile. That's an I love my dad smile. She's 3 weeks old. Love knows no age limit. We settled into something like a routine. I took parental leave from work, 12 weeks that I planned to savor. Lucas worked from home as much as possible, his laptop set up in the nursery so he could be close. We were tired, we were overwhelmed, but we were happy in a way I hadn't thought possible 6 months ago. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, the doorbell rang. I was feeding Grace in the living room, and Lucas was at the store picking up diapers. I almost didn't answer. Marva had left the day before, and I was still adjusting to being on my own with the baby. But the doorbell rang again, persistent, and I carefully stood with Grace, still latched and feeding under a nursing cover. I opened the door and found my mother standing on the porch. She looked terrible, thin in a way that spoke of stress rather than intention, her hair grayer, her face drawn. She was wearing a coat I recognized from years ago, holding her purse in front of her like a shield, and when she saw me, saw the baby-shaped bundle under the nursing cover, her face crumpled. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, I just need to see. I need to know." Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door, to protect Grace from this woman who'd abandoned me, to refuse the same way I'd been refused. But I saw tears on my mother's cheeks, and despite everything, despite the months of silence and pain, I couldn't do it. I couldn't become them. "Come in," I said quietly, stepping back. She followed me inside, her movements hesitant, her eyes locked on the nursing cover. I sat back down on the couch and adjusted Grace, who had finished eating and was doing the drowsy, milk-drunk thing that always made my heart melt. "Would you like to hold her?" I asked, and my mother's inhale was sharp with surprise. "May I?" I nodded and carefully transferred Grace to her arms. My mother took her like she was made of glass, staring down at her granddaughter's face with an expression I couldn't quite name. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She's so beautiful. Her name is Grace." Grace. My mother traced one finger down Grace's cheek, and a tear fell onto the baby's blanket. Grace Catherine. I saw the birth announcement online, on Catherine Harrison's social media. "She's her namesake," I said, and watched my mother flinch. "I'm sorry." The words burst out of her like they'd been dammed up too long. "God, I'm so sorry. For everything, for how we treated you, for what we said, for—" She stopped, overcome, tears streaming freely now. "I was wrong. We were wrong. We were so worried about what people would think, about our reputation, about— It doesn't matter. None of it matters. We threw away our daughter because we were scared and stupid and prideful, and She looked up at me, her eyes red and desperate. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that I've missed you every single day since that night." My mother handed her back reluctantly, and I stood to rock Grace back to sleep. "Why now?" I asked, the same question I'd asked my father. "Why did it take this long?" "Pride," my mother admitted. "Fear. Your father was so convinced we'd done the right thing, and I let him convince me too. But then the article came out, and I saw what everyone was saying, and I realized people who didn't know you could see what we couldn't, that you were brave and strong, and we were cowards. I wanted to come sooner, but your father—" She stopped, shook her head. "That's not fair. I can't blame him. I made my own choices. I chose wrong." "You did," I agreed quietly. You chose to throw me away when I needed you most. Do you understand what that did to me? How many nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what was wrong with me? Why I wasn't worth loving? Nothing is wrong with you. God, baby, nothing has ever been wrong with you. Don't call me baby. The words came out sharp. You don't get to use pet names. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She nodded, accepting the boundary. You're right. I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a while, Grace falling asleep in my arms, my mother perched on the edge of the couch like she might need to flee at any moment. Where's Dad? I finally asked. At home. He's still struggling with this, with admitting he was wrong. I think he will, eventually, but his pride is. She trailed off, and I could fill in the rest. His pride was too big, too fragile, too important to wound with something as simple as an apology to his only daughter. I can't have him around Grace, I said, not until he's ready to actually apologize and mean it. I won't subject my daughter to conditional love. She's going to grow up knowing she's loved exactly as she is. I understand. That's more than fair. My mother twisted her hands in her lap. What about me? Is there any chance? Could I possibly? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I want you in my life after everything that's happened, but I do know that I'm not going to make that decision today. That's fair. That's more than I deserve. It is, I agreed, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. Because I don't want to be the kind of person who slams doors in faces, even when they deserve it. I don't want Grace to grow up thinking that's what you do when someone hurts you. My mother nodded, fresh tears spilling over. She's lucky to have you as her mother. I know, I said, and I meant it. I'm a good mom. I'm going to be a great mom because I'm going to love her better than I was loved. The barb hit home. I saw it in the way my mother's shoulders hunched, in the fresh wave of tears. Good. Let it hurt. Let her feel a fraction of what I'd felt. I should go, she said after a moment, standing on shaky legs. Thank you for letting me see her, for letting me hold her. I know I didn't earn that. You didn't, I agreed, walking her to the door. But Grace deserves to know her grandmother, if her grandmother can be someone worth knowing. So you have time to figure that out, to decide if you're going to be part of our lives in a real way or just someone who shows up when it's convenient. I want to be part of your lives, however you'll let me, whatever that looks like. Then start by respecting my boundaries. Don't show up uninvited again. Don't call unless I tell you it's okay. Don't tell Dad where I live or try to arrange some big reunion. If we're going to do this, we do it slowly, on my terms. Yes, absolutely, whatever you need. I opened the door and she stepped out onto the porch. She turned back, looking like she wanted to say more, but I was done talking, done explaining, done carrying the emotional weight of our relationship. Goodbye, I said, and closed the door. I stood there for a long moment, Grace sleeping peacefully in my arms, my heart hammering in my chest. Then I called Lucas. My mother was here, I said when he answered. What? Is she still there? Are you okay? I'm fine. She's gone. I let her hold Grace. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, how do you feel about that? I don't know yet. Ask me in a few days. Do you want me to come home? No, finish shopping. We need diapers more than we need drama. He laughed, relieved. I love you. You know that, right? I love you, and I'm so proud of you. I love you too. Now get the diapers. She's going to wake up hungry in about an hour, and what goes in must come out. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze, processing what had happened, trying to sort through the complicated tangle of emotions. Part of me wanted to call my mother back, to yell at her, to make her understand exactly how much she'd hurt me. Part of me wanted to forgive her immediately, to have my mother back in my life. And another part of me, the strongest part, just wanted to protect Grace from ever feeling the way I'd felt. When Lucas got home, I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his face cycling through anger and concern and something that looked like pride. What do you want to do? He asked when I finished. I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know if I can forgive her. I don't know if I want her in our lives. But I also don't know if I can shut the door completely. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. You don't have to decide now. You don't have to decide ever, actually. You can just exist with the uncertainty for a while. That's what Catherine said when I called her earlier. His eyebrows rose. You called my mom? Our mom, I corrected. And yes, I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't tell me what to do. She said something that stuck with me. She said that forgiveness isn't about absolving someone else's guilt. It's about freeing yourself from carrying their mistakes. But that doesn't mean you have to let them back in your life. She's right. Lucas sat beside me, carefully so as not to wake Grace, who had transferred to his arms without waking. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. If you want to give your mother a chance, we'll do it carefully. If you want to cut ties completely, we'll do that too. This is your call. I leaned against his shoulder, watching our daughter sleep. I think I want to try. Slowly. Very slowly. But I think I want to see if she's capable of being the mother I needed her to be 6 months ago. And your father? Not until he apologizes. Not until he can look me in the eye and admit he was wrong. I won't subject Grace to someone who thinks love should come with conditions. Good, Lucas said firmly. That's good. Christmas came, our first as a family. Catherine insisted we celebrate at their house, and the day was a blur of expensive gifts and too much food, and Grace being passed around like a small, adorable football. Catherine had bought enough presents to fill a toy store, and Richard had indeed set up a trust fund that made my eyes water when Lucas showed me the paperwork. You don't have to do this, I'd told them, overwhelmed. We want to, Catherine said simply. She's our granddaughter. This is what grandparents do. My mother sent a gift, a handmade quilt with Grace's name embroidered in careful stitches. The note attached said simply, I made this for you. I hope she'll use it. I hope someday you'll let me give it to her in person. Mom. I cried when I opened it, and Lucas held me while Catherine diplomatically disappeared to check on dinner. The quilt was beautiful, clearly made with love and care, every stitch perfect. It must have taken her weeks. She's trying, Lucas said quietly. I know. That's what makes it hard. I sent a text. Thank you for the quilt. It's beautiful. You can visit again in January. We'll arrange a time. And turned off my phone before I could see her response. The new year came, bringing with it a return to work and the complicated dance of balancing career and motherhood. The law firm was accommodating, letting me work reduced hours and bring Grace with me sometimes when childcare fell through. Catherine helped when she could, delighting in her grandmother role, and we hired a nanny, a wonderful woman named Rosa who treated Grace like her own. Life found a rhythm. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. My mother visited once a month, always at arranged times, always respectful of boundaries. She never pushed, never asked for more than I was willing to give. She held Grace and talked to her and told her stories about me as a child, stories I'd forgotten or never known. You were such a serious baby, she said during one visit, Grace asleep in her arms, always watching everything, taking it all in. Your father used to call you his little philosopher. It was the first time she'd mentioned my father without me asking. I stiffened, waiting. He asks about you, she continued quietly, about Grace. He won't admit he was wrong, but I can see it eating at him. He's lost weight. Stopped sleeping well. The church. She stopped, shook her head. Several families left after everything that happened. They didn't agree with how we handled things, and the ones who stayed treat us differently now, like we're examples of what not to do. Good, I said, and meant it. You have every right to feel that way. I do, but that doesn't mean I enjoy knowing he's suffering. It just means I understand that consequences exist. She nodded, accepting that. Do you think there's any chance you could see him, let him meet Grace? When he apologizes. A real apology, not a justification wrapped in scripture. Until then, no. My mother never brought it up again. Grace grew, as babies do, impossibly fast. rolling over at 4 months, sitting up at 6, crawling at 8. Every milestone felt like a miracle and a loss simultaneously. I wanted her to stay small forever and couldn't wait to see who she'd become. Lucas was besotted. He documented everything, taking hundreds of photos, keeping a journal of Grace's firsts. He built her a sandbox in our backyard and a swing set that could probably withstand a hurricane. He read to her every night, doing different voices for different characters, making her giggle with his exaggerated expressions. "You're going to spoil her," I told him. "That's the plan," he replied, unrepentant. Catherine threw Grace a first birthday party that was more elaborate than some weddings I'd attended. There were ponies and a bounce house and enough cake to feed a small army. Grace, overwhelmed and sugar high, cried through most of it, but Catherine declared it a perfect success. My mother attended, having graduated from monthly visits to occasional texts and phone calls. She brought a gift, a silver rattle that had been mine as a baby, and stayed for exactly the amount of time I'd said was acceptable. She never overstepped, never presumed, and slowly, painfully, I started to trust her again. Not completely, not the way I'd trusted her before, but enough. Then, 3 weeks after Grace's first birthday, my father had a heart attack. My mother called at 2 in the morning, her voice shaking. "He's at County General. They're saying they don't know if. Please, I know I have no right to ask, but please come." Lucas drove us to the hospital, Grace sleeping in her car seat, me staring out the window at the dark streets and trying to sort through the mess of emotions. Fear, anger, grief, guilt, they all tangled together until I couldn't tell one from another. The hospital was harsh with fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. My mother was in the cardiac unit waiting room, small and broken in a plastic chair. When she saw me, she stood on shaky legs. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't think. I know you didn't have to." "Is he alive?" "Yes, they did emergency surgery, a stent, they called it. He's stable now, but," her voice broke, "he could have died. He almost did die. And the last thing he said to you was that you weren't his daughter anymore." I sat down heavily, Grace stirring in my arms. "Where is he?" "ICU. They're only letting one visitor at a time. I've been with him, but he's sedated, hasn't woken up yet." She looked at Grace, then back at me. "Would you, if he wakes up, would you be willing to see him?" Every fiber of my being wanted to say no, wanted to tell her that he'd had months to make this right and had chosen pride instead, that I wouldn't be emotionally manipulated by a medical emergency into giving him the forgiveness he hadn't earned. But I looked at my mother's face, at the fear and exhaustion there, and I thought about Grace growing up and asking someday why she only had one grandmother. I thought about teaching her that love could be conditional, that grudges were more important than grace. "If he wants to see me," I said carefully, "and if he's actually ready to apologize, really apologize, then yes. But I'm not going in there to be lectured or guilted or preached at. If he wants his daughter back, he needs to act like a father." My mother nodded, relief flooding her face. "Thank you, thank you." We waited. Lucas got coffee from a vending machine that tasted like punishment. Grace woke up and needed to be fed, changed, entertained. I walked her up and down the hallway, bouncing her gently, singing soft songs while we waited for word about whether my father would live or die. The sun came up, gray and reluctant through the hospital windows. A doctor came out, looking tired, and spoke quietly to my mother. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her shoulders relax slightly. "He's awake," she told me, "groggy from the medication, but awake, and he's asking for you." My heart hammered. "What did you tell him?" "That you were here, that you brought Grace." "He cried," she said it simply, without embellishment. "He actually cried. I haven't seen him cry in 20 years. I handed Grace to Lucas. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, come get me." "You got it." I followed my mother through doors marked authorized personnel only, into a unit that smelled like medicine and fear. My father's room was small, crowded with machines that beeped and hummed. and there he was, looking smaller than I remembered, paler, with tubes and wires connecting him to various devices. His eyes found me immediately, and I watched him try to speak, fail, try again. "Baby girl," he finally managed, his voice rough and weak. I stayed by the door. "Don't. We've been over this. You don't get pet names until you earn them." He closed his eyes, and tears leaked from the corners. "I'm sorry." "For what specifically?" "For everything. For what I said that night, for kicking you out, for choosing my pride over my daughter." Each word seemed to cost him effort. "For not being there when you needed me, for missing your wedding, for not meeting Grace yet, for being," his voice broke, "for being a coward who cared more about what the church thought than about his own child." I stayed silent, waiting, needing more. "You were right," he continued, his eyes still closed. "What you said that night when I came to your house, it was about my reputation, about looking good. I told myself it was about morals and values, but it was about me, about not wanting to be embarrassed, and I've paid for that. Lost half my congregation, lost my daughter, almost lost my life." He opened his eyes, looking at me directly. "I was wrong, completely, utterly wrong, and I am so, so sorry." The tears I'd been holding back came then, hot and fast. "You threw me away," I said, my voice breaking. "You made me feel like I was worthless, like I wasn't good enough to love. Do you understand what that did to me?" "I do now. God help me, I do now." He tried to sit up and winced, falling back. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know. I needed to say it while I still could. I was wrong. You are worthy of love. You are good enough. You—" He stopped, struggling. "You are the best thing I ever did in my life, and I threw you away like trash, and I will regret that until the day I die." I moved closer to the bed, close enough to see the lines pain had carved around his eyes. "I have a daughter now. Her name is Grace. And I've had to learn how to be a parent without you, how to love her without conditions, and it's the easiest thing I've ever done. Loving her is easy, natural, so I keep wondering, why was it so hard for you? Why did your love come with so many rules?" "It shouldn't have," he said. "Love isn't supposed to work that way. I know that now. I'm asking, I'm begging for a chance to do better, to be a grandfather who loves unconditionally. To be a father who doesn't fail you again." I stood there, looking at this man who had once been my hero, who had taught me to ride a bike and checked under my bed for monsters and told me I could be anything I wanted. Somewhere along the way, he'd become someone else, someone rigid and afraid. But maybe, lying in this hospital bed, faced with his own mortality, he'd found his way back to who he used to be. "I'm not ready to fully forgive you," I said carefully. "That's going to take time, maybe a lot of time, but I'm willing to try, slowly, with boundaries. Because my daughter deserves to know her grandfather, if he's someone worth knowing." "I'll be worth knowing," he promised. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Then start by getting better. Focus on recovering. When you're out of here, we'll talk about what comes next." "Can I," he hesitated, "can I at least see her? Just for a minute? I just need to see her face." I looked at my mother, who had been standing silently in the corner. She nodded encouragingly. "1 minute," I said, "and only because I don't want her first memory of you to be in a hospital bed, so this doesn't count." This is just, consider it a preview. I went to get Grace from the waiting room. Lucas handed her over with a questioning look, and I just shook my head. Later. Grace was awake and alert, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with her serious brown eyes. My eyes, I'd realized, not Lucas's after all. I carried her back to the ICU, past the nurses who probably should have stopped me but didn't, and into my father's room. His face when he saw her, I'll never forget it. Wonder and grief and love all mixed together, tears streaming freely down his face. "Hi, Grace," he whispered. "I'm your grandpa, And I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you were born. But I'm here now, and I promise," his voice broke, "I promise I'm going to be better." Grace, oblivious to the weight of the moment, reached for the beeping monitor, fascinated by the lights. I let her look for exactly 1 minute, then pulled her back. "That's all for now," I said. "Get better. We'll see you when you're home." I left before he could respond, before I could start crying again, before the complicated mess of emotions could overwhelm me completely. Lucas drove us home as the sun climbed higher, Grace falling asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the early morning drama. He didn't ask questions, just held my hand when he wasn't shifting gears. "My father apologized," I said finally. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in a few days." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "That's becoming your catchphrase." "It's an honest answer." "It is, and I love you for your honesty." "Even when it's messy?" "Especially then." My father recovered. It took weeks, but he recovered. Physical therapy, medication, dietary changes, and a forced retirement from his deacon position. The church asked him to step down, not unkindly, but firmly. Too much scandal, they said. Better for everyone if he took time to focus on family. He and my mother sold their big house, the one I'd grown up in, and moved to a smaller place closer to us. Not too close, but close enough that visits didn't require major planning. The first real visit happened on a Saturday in spring when Grace was 14 months old. My parents came to our house for lunch, and I'd never been more nervous. I'd cleaned everything twice, made enough food for an army, and changed my outfit 3 times. "It's going to be fine," Lucas assured me, but even he looked tense. Catherine had offered to be there, for moral support or as a buffer or to throw them out if needed, but I'd declined. This needed to be just us. When they arrived, my father looked different. Thinner, grayer, but also somehow lighter, like he'd put down a weight he'd been carrying too long. My mother looked cautiously hopeful. "Thank you for having us," my father said formally, like we were strangers, which, in many ways, we were. "Come in," I said. "Grace is in the living room." She was on her playmat, surrounded by toys, babbling to herself in that language only toddlers speak. When she saw strangers, she went quiet, watching them with her serious eyes. My father knelt down slowly, his knees weren't what they used to be, and sat on the floor near her, but not too close. "Hi, Grace. I'm your Grandpa Jim. I've been waiting a long time to meet you properly." Grace stared at him, then looked at me for confirmation that this was okay. I nodded, and she turned back to him, considering. "I built you something," he said, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. "It's a music box. You wind it up here," he demonstrated, "and it plays a song, the same song I used to play for your mama when she was little." The music that came out was Somewhere Over the Rainbow, tinny and sweet. Grace's eyes went wide, and she crawled closer, reaching for the box. My father let her take it, his hands shaking slightly. "That's right, it's yours to keep." I felt tears building and blinked them back. He'd remembered. After everything, he'd remembered my favorite lullaby. The visit was awkward, but not terrible. We ate lunch, made small talk, let Grace warm up to these new people in her life. My father didn't preach or lecture. He didn't try to explain away his behavior or make excuses. He just tried to be present, to be kind, to be the grandfather he'd said he wanted to be. When they left, my mother hugged me tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for this chance." "Don't waste it," I said. "I won't give you another one." "I won't. We won't." Over the following months, we built something new. Not the relationship we'd had before. That was gone, destroyed by their choices and my hurt. But something different, more honest maybe, built on choice rather than obligation. My parents visited regularly, always at arranged times, always respectful. They watched Grace while Lucas and I went on date nights. They came to her doctor's appointments when I needed support. They slowly, carefully earned their way back into my life. My father never fully regained his old confidence. The heart attack and the losses that followed had changed him, made him quieter, more thoughtful. But he was also gentler, more present. He listened more than he spoke now, asked questions instead of giving commands. I wasted so many years, he told me once, watching Grace play in our backyard, being so certain I was right about everything, being so afraid of what people thought. And I almost died without fixing it, without telling you how much I love you, how proud I am of you. You're telling me now, I said. That counts for something. Does it, after everything? It does to me, and that's what matters. Catherine and my mother developed an unlikely friendship. They were nothing alike. Catherine with her boardrooms and designer clothes, my mother with her church committees and thrift store finds. But they both loved Grace, and they both loved me, and that gave them common ground. Your other grandmother is teaching me about wine, my mother told me once, sounding simultaneously scandalized and delighted. I had a glass of Chardonnay last week. Don't tell your father. Mom, you're 60 years old. You can drink wine if you want to. I know, but it feels so rebellious, she laughed. Catherine says I should have been rebelling decades ago. That women our age are supposed to be free, not constrained by what people think. She's very persuasive. She is that. I like her. She's fierce, and she loves you so much. You can see it in everything she does. She's been a better mother to you than I was, hasn't she? The question was tentative, vulnerable, and I chose my answer carefully. She was the mother I needed when you weren't there, but you're trying to be the mother I need now. Both things can be true. Thank you for that, Grace, my mother said softly. I know I don't deserve it. Maybe not, but Grace does. She deserves grandparents who are present, who love each other, who show up. So I'm choosing Grace for her, even when it's hard. You're so much stronger than I ever was. I learned it from surviving what you did to me, I said, not unkindly. Pain has a way of teaching strength. Grace turned 2, then 3. She started preschool, making friends and learning to share, and coming home with artwork that we displayed on the refrigerator like it belonged in a gallery. She called Catherine Grandma Cat and my mother Grandma Mary, and loved them both fiercely, innocently, without any knowledge of the complicated history between us. Lucas got a promotion at work. I made partner at the firm. We bought a bigger house with a proper backyard and room for the siblings Grace constantly asked for. We were happy in a way I'd once thought impossible, not perfect, but real and earned and ours. One Sunday afternoon when Grace was 4, we had a family barbecue. Both sets of grandparents, Lucas and me, Grace running around with the puppy Catherine had insisted we needed. It was chaos, Grace shrieking with laughter, the dog barking, adults talking over each other, the smell of burgers on the grill mixing with Catherine's expensive perfume. I stood on the porch watching it all, and my mother came to stand beside me. This is what it should have been, she said quietly, from the beginning. This love, this acceptance. I robbed you of this for those first months, and I'm so sorry. I know you are, and I've forgiven you, mostly, but I haven't forgotten. I don't think I ever will. I don't want you to forget. I want you to remember so you can be better. So Grace never has to feel what you felt. She won't, I said with certainty. I'll make sure of it. You're a wonderful mother, better than I was, better than I ever could have been. I looked at her, this woman who had failed me so spectacularly and was trying so hard to make it right. You know what I've learned? Being a good mother isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, about choosing your children over your pride, over your reputation, over your fear. You didn't do that when it mattered most, but you're doing it now, and that counts. She wiped her eyes. I don't deserve your grace. Probably not, but I'm giving it anyway. Not for you, for me, because I don't want to carry anger anymore. I don't want Grace to grow up seeing me bitter and hard, so I'm choosing to let it go. Not forgetting, but forgiving. There's a difference. There is, she agreed, and you're teaching me what it looks like. My father called Grace over, and she ran to him, throwing herself into his arms with absolute trust. He caught her, laughing, and spun her around gently. She shrieked with delight, and he set her down, kissing the top of her head. Again, Grandpa. Again. My back can't take again, he said, but he was smiling. Go ask your daddy to spin you. He's younger and less breakable. She ran off, and my father looked up, catching my eye across the yard. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." I nodded, and in that moment I felt something release in my chest, the last threads of the hurt I'd been carrying for 5 years. Not gone entirely, probably never entirely gone, but loosened enough that I could breathe around it. Catherine appeared at my other side, because of course she did. She had an uncanny ability to know when I needed her. You did good, she said, not whispering, not trying to hide the conversation from my mother. Building this family, creating this life. You did so good, sweetheart. We did good, I corrected. You and Richard and Lucas and me. We all built this. True, but you were the foundation. Your strength, your grace, your refusal to become bitter, that's what made all of this possible. My mother made a small sound, and when I looked at her, there were tears on her cheeks. I don't deserve to be part of this, she said. I know I don't. But thank you for letting me be here anyway. You're Grace's grandmother, I said simply, and you're trying. That's enough. We stood there, the 3 of us, 3 mothers, 3 women who had learned in different ways what it meant to love and fail and try again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the ending I would have written 5 years ago when I was sitting in my car outside my parents' house crying in the rain. But it was real, and it was ours, and that was enough. That night, after everyone had gone home and Grace was asleep clutching her music box, I stood in her doorway watching her breathe. Lucas came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Good day, he asked. Good day, I agreed. Strange, but good. Are you happy? I thought about it, really thought about it. Was I happy? After everything that had happened, everything I'd lost and found and rebuilt? Yes, I said, and meant it completely. I'm happy, not in spite of everything that happened, but maybe because of it. I learned what love should look like. I learned who I am when everything is stripped away. I learned that family isn't just blood, it's choice. I'm glad, Lucas said, kissing my shoulder. You deserve happiness. You deserve all of this. So do you. So does she. I nodded toward Grace's sleeping form. We all deserve love that doesn't come with conditions, and now she has it. We stood there for a long moment, watching our daughter sleep, surrounded by the life we'd built from the ruins of my old one. And I thought about that night 5 years ago, about the girl who had left her parents' house with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. I wished I could go back and tell her that it would be okay, that she would find love, real love, unconditional love, that she would have a daughter who would never question whether she was worthy, that she would build a family from scratch, chosen and beautiful and hers. But I couldn't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward, carrying our scars and our lessons and our hard-won wisdom. So I stood in my daughter's doorway, held by the man who had never left, surrounded by the family who had chosen me when my own wouldn't, and I let myself feel it all, the gratitude, the grief, the joy, the peace. They had taken away my name, my home, and my pride, but I had taken back everything they couldn't touch, my truth, my peace, and the knowledge that I was always worthy of love. I just needed to find the people who could see it, and I had.